Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for participating in this interview. Uh,
Thanks for having me.
my pleasure. This series is entitled Meet the Change Leaders. And boy, you've had an amazing career, so you certainly epitomize that title. You're now the director of the Center for Democracy Innovation at the National Civic League. And there you lead an abundance of democracy strengthening programs. And before that, you had a 20-year career with Public and Gender and other organizations as a networker, a convener, a commentator, an author. And I can go on, but then we wouldn't have an interview. I think I'll start with a question. Of course, you've had a very long career, but reflecting just on 2023, bring it back to the current and 2000, the first 3 months of 2024. As you think back in the last year and a half, what's the most impactful project or success story that comes to mind in terms of the incredibly important democracy work you're doing? I'd love to hear about that.
Sure. No, and thank you so much for having me on. It's great to talk with you. So for me, 2023 was a kind of a transition in the sense that I started this new project called the Center for Democracy Innovation at the National Civic League. The Civic League is an historic organization founded by Teddy Roosevelt, Louis Brandeis in 1894, and it was part of the kind of the enormous shift of the early 20th century, where in kind of response to many of the pressures and problems of the day, they took a whole bunch of democracy innovations and incorporated them into the way that local, state, and federal governments work. So that was when the city manager form of government started. That was when the ballot initiative and referendum was started. All kinds of things. And so the idea of the center was to figure out now, 100 years later, what are the next set of democracy innovations that are going to be helpful to people, that are needed to be part of our system today. And so that was the biggest thing that happened. And I'll just mention a couple things. We can go into them more if you'd like. But the two biggest projects that we've been working on in the year since we started was the Healthy Democracy Ecosystem Map, where we've now mapped 10,700 organizations across the country who are doing something to strengthen democracy in America. And then the Better Public Meetings Project, which is changing how local governments, school systems, and other institutions interact with their citizens.
Boy, there's a lot of great work. I don't know where to dig in first. Our City Biz viewers would be very interested in learning more. I think I'll start with the mapping because as the co-founder of an organization called the Bridge Alliance, we've been trying for years to bring some collective impact, some coherence to the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of organizations doing incredible work. But most Americans don't know how many organizations there are or what they're doing. So why don't you start by giving us a sense of your vision of how a map might work and how that might be helpful to just regular American citizens to become civically engaged?
Sure. Yeah, no, part of our problem is that the word democracy in this country has become so shriveled. People conflate it. It's just about voting. It's basically what it is for most people. And that's a very insufficient message. It's an insufficient role for citizens and for our country. So partly what we want to do is kind of show all the different activities, types of work that democracy is, a healthy democracy is. And that's what the map is all about. And basically what we're trying to do is kind of gather up all of the groups around the country doing service, all those doing civic media and journalism, all of those doing civic technology in one form or another, all the groups doing civic education, participatory decision-making, budgeting, sorts of things like that. All the different kind of elements of bridge building, certainly one of them, all these different elements of democracy work, some of these groups don't even refer to themselves as doing, or building healthy democracy, and yet they are. So we want to kind of hold this up and say, look, democracy is all of these things. Democracy is about people getting involved in all these different sorts of ways. So we want to kind of show this and visually. And so what we have now is a data set of 10,700 organizations, and it's growing and growing. We're going to be able to show, we are able to show geographically where these groups are, and you can kind of be able to zoom in on Arkansas or South Florida or wherever you want to kind of figure out who's doing what where. The map will also show the network connections through the work of great, networkers like the Bridge Alliance. How are these people, how are these different organizations connected to one another? What are the gaps we need to kind of fill in for people? And then it'll also show some of the financial side of it. How is this work being funded? What types of funding? What are the levels? How is that rising and falling over time? And so in all these ways, you get this much more holistic, robust picture of what does democracy look like and all the people who are trying to make democracy better.
Now, that's fascinating. How would you respond to the citizen who might say, Matt, nothing will ever change. Why should I waste my time? It's so bureaucratic. It's all about power, money. Maybe I'll vote, but really, I'm not going to change anything. So why should I bother? You have a comment?
Well, exactly. So, yeah. Well, and so, I think that we unintentionally kind of, we push people to think that way. When we talk about saving democracy, we talk about democracy if it's a static thing. It never has been static. It's been changing the whole time. It goes through, periods of particularly dramatic change, like it did in the first, few years of the National Civic League, and like it is now. And so in democracy, it has to change partly because we have changed. If you think about how Americans have changed over the last decades, the levels of education, literacy, numeracy have gone through the roof. People's deference toward authority of all kinds, political, religious, social, has gone down and down and down since the 70s. And we have the internet. We are different people than we were. And our institutions are mostly shaped according to kind of a format that was created, and things like our public meetings. We use a format which is about 75 years old. So we're long past the point where we need innovation in some of the structural aspects of democracy. And by collecting up all of these innovations, part of what we can kind of help people understand is here's how we can change the way our structures work so that they fit what we need today.
Well, you mentioned that these problems that people, and we consider them very serious now, but our country's gone through serious situations in the past. As you reflect back on your long career of over 20 years, are there any particular leaders that come to mind in the either nonprofit world or political leaders or social leaders or activists who were able to grasp that moment and who served a purpose for you in leading you into this work and into this field?
Well, yeah, there's certainly lots of people who have been incredibly helpful to me and others. Carolyn Lukensmeyer, who's my partner, she and I are directing the Healthy Democracy Mapping Project. Is certainly one of them. There's many people. I think, though, that the people who inspire me most, and I imagine you'll agree with this, are the people working at the local level to get people involved in service, in bridge building, or in participation, or building equity, whatever it is. Those are the people, and their work is often not, recognized as much as it should be. And they are the glue, they're the people, these kind of local civic leaders are the ones who are in some ways the most inspiring. And I think part of what we want to recognize is kind of what their contributions have been and how do we make it easier for people like that to serve in those sorts of roles.
Are you involved at all in the upcoming election process? Because you mentioned local leaders, and elections are normally, I want to say controlled, but that's not the right word, run by local volunteer poll workers. Is your work, get you involved in that at all? Because there's a lot of concern about November and the integrity of the upcoming election. So are you involved in that at all?
Well, so we think the map is going to be helpful for people doing election-related sorts of work and to kind of recognize the different networks through which people kind of figure out how to get registered or who to vote for. Those sorts of things are very important, and that'll all be evident in the map. The other thing, though, is that we're partnering with an organization called ActiVote, which is a really unusual platform and tool for people who are voting, because it actually goes beyond the basic information. It kind of helps people figure out, based on their own policy preferences and ideas, who should they be voting for? I mean, just basically mapping, here's your beliefs compared to the other, the three candidates in next month's, state house race or city council or whatever. So ActiVote goes farther as far as kind of giving people information about how to make their choices, about the candidates, about ballot initiatives and referenda, and it also kind of has interesting, fun things on it as well. There's this daily civics quiz that people are taking. It's like Wordle, but better. And how many 5-letter words can there be? And so this more than we thought. That's right. But the civics quiz is about all kinds of things related to democracy, citizenship, civic life in America, and it's very interesting. And the kind of leading scorer between now and June is going to win a prize. They'll be the National Civic Champion. The prize is given away at the All-America City Awards, which is one of the big National Civic League events happening in Denver in June. There's.
Tell us about that event a little. Is that an event in NCL, or tell us?
Yes, All-America City Awards have been going on for 75 years. It brings together delegations from 20 different communities, of small towns, big cities, everything in between, and they compete to be named an All-America City. It's really amazing because their applications are very serious and full of data and impacts and things like that. The way that they present them, though, these teams of 20 to 60 people present what's great about their community to a jury, and they do it with song and dance and comedy sketches and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's a great celebration of the culture and kind of the spirit of a city, in addition to kind of the kind of very serious accomplishments that they have. So it's a great look at kind of community civic life as it really is in all its diversity, because these delegations have young people and senior citizens and business leaders and city managers and all kinds of it's just this cross-sector, cross-ideological set of people. Last year's event, I met Miss Black San Antonio. I met the Major General in charge of Fort Liberty in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I met the head librarian of Redwood City, California. They were all in their own ways leaders of these groups, and doing all kinds of great work in their community. So it's really, really inspiring.
Well, that's fascinating. We're running out of time, but you have such a sense of optimism, yet the country is an enthusiasm. So I hate to turn it on this negative note, but maybe you could turn this negative into a positive. I mean, we're obviously has deep divisions in our country right now, and the causes of them are many. Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see some reasons for optimism in the next 3-4 years, or we just have to stick to it and fight through it and hope for the best?
Well, so yeah, I am optimistic, and my optimism is informed by two things. One, my work as a practitioner. So I've been doing kind of dialogue and deliberation work since the mid-90s. And I know, having seen it over and over again through things that I set up or other people have organized, when you get a diverse set of people with diverse viewpoints in a room in the right sort of structure and process, they agree on all kinds of stuff, and they will do all kinds of things, and they empathize with one another. The structure has to be there to make that easier to do. That structure is completely missing from our public meetings, from other aspects of kind of the way that our democracy works. But it is possible. People, who believe all different kinds of things can work together. And that's also the other side of that gives me optimism, is that the research shows that when you ask people in surveys and polls and things like that about their policy preferences, they agree on a whole lot more than they disagree on. So it is not a question of us being completely different and incompatible people. We haven't changed all that much, in fact. What has changed are the fact that our institutions are out of step with the way we live today. What has changed is the media coverage of these things, and of course, leaders who kind of play upon that and use that for their own personal gain to kind of exploit some of the divisions that we all see in the media.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Matt. Anybody who wants to learn more, just go to the National Civic League website. You'll find an abundance of information, and hopefully the City Biz viewers, the Fulcrum viewers, all go to the website and learn about how they can participate and help our democracy achieve the goals that are still admirable and hopefully will be achieved. So thank you so much, Matt. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, David.